All right, Dee and Matty, if y'all are ready, we'll get started. My name is Will Sager. I'm with the Southeast Recycling Development Council. We are proud to have Matty Stanislaus with us today for this webinar. Just a little bit of housekeeping. You will have the opportunity to ask some questions. You can access your control panel in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. If it's not expanded, the little red arrow in that box up there will give that to you, and the number to call in is on the screen and also available in your control panel. With that, we're going to get started. Our conversation with Matty as we start this, Matty Stanislaus came to the SERDC Summit in Alabama back in November as the speaker for our luncheon. He gave a presentation on where EPA is with recycling and looking to go forward. We received many questions from our audience, and we answered as many as there were time for, but we are bringing this back together to provide the opportunity to address the rest of those questions, and are very proud to have Matty with us. I'll briefly just show the SERDC sponsors that make this possible. These are the companies at the sponsorship level supporting SERDC's efforts in the region to advance recycling and to unite government and industry for sustainable recycling. I want to introduce Matty. He is a presidential appointee with the Environmental Protection Agency as an assistant administrator in the Office of Solid Waste and Emergency Response. Matty leads land cleanup, solid waste, particularly as it relates to recycling, and emergency response programs. Mr. Stanislaus is a chemical engineer and environmental lawyer with over 20 years in the environmental field in public and private sectors. Matty, before we start our questions, we'd like to give you the opportunity to set the tone and any comments that you have for our audience. I'll give it to you, Matty.
Sure, and thanks, Will. And let me start off with really thanking you and the real great work of SERDC. And I was really impressed with all that you have done and the opportunity that we still exist in the future. You know, I also want to thank John Johnston and Jay Batchelor about all the work that they have done. So let me just start off, and I'm a big champion of trying to figure out the opportunities of materials recovery for its environmental and economic reasons. You know, it creates jobs, the kind of things that you all have done a great job in identifying. You know, it is really a raw material, a feedstock to fuel and expand the manufacturing sector, and you all have done in kind of identifying those opportunities. And, you know, some of the work that you've done in terms of identifying I think over 206 manufacturing facilities that are recipient of recovered materials, in 48,000 people in manufacturing jobs, and the real connection between the economic benefit of that. But we have more to go. So we've identified, for example, a domestic capacity of 2 billion pounds of soda bottles, yet we only collect about 1.4 billion pounds. So these lost poundage reflects lost energy, lost economic materials, and lost efficiency in the manufacturing. The aluminum industry, for example, over half of the cans that could be recycled are currently thrown away in landfills. Glass, we have a capacity to recycle that exceeds 65% of what we actually collect in recycled material. So I think there's a lot more to go, and I'm really interested in the work that you all have done and how we can collectively work to elevate the importance of capturing of materials so that we can continue to fuel its use as a feedstock to benefit manufacturing, benefit economy, benefit job creation, and benefit the environment. So with that, I will close and look forward to this exchange.
Thank you, Matty. We will have our questions so the audience can see them, and I promise you this is the longest, wordiest of those questions. I'll paraphrase some, but in the 90s we saw the expansion of municipal recycling collection across the nation, as the 90s was the decade of the environment, and particularly in the early part of that following the garbage barge issue of the late 80s. Many recycling programs are up, and there was a surge of material hit the market, and not all of it found a home. There was a story that ran of a warehouse in New Jersey, I believe it was, that was full of baled newspaper with no place to go. That set back our efforts and set a perception that industry wasn't ready to accept this. We're now 20 years later, and industry indeed has responded to these opportunities, many of them that, Matty, you referred to for energy efficiency and others, and the capacities in place. In fact, industry has exceeded this. How do we go back now and address the supply side to fill this shortfall?
Sure. Well, thank you, Will, and let me just give you some thoughts. One, I do want to continue to the engagement with you all and how we can kind of capture the network that you've established. But there's some specific things that we are doing. So the EPA has really pushed market development since the 90s. We used to do the semi-annual recycling economic impact job study, creating jobs through recycling program and waste-wise programming, grants and technical assistance. And we completely agree there needs to be a renewed emphasis on the supply side, more over today than ever. So EPA will be publishing an updated recycling economic impacts job study and the metrics this spring, and we'll be focusing on encouraging building new infrastructure for materials recovery and enhancing existing infrastructure for its value-added proposition that you all have done a great job in articulating. We're also going to improve our data collection. And one of the things that you and others, both the private sector and the states have all, and local governments have all said is we need to have rigor and consistency of data collection and measurement. You know, we continue to want to do that and enhance that. I mean, convening partners, and I think is really critical. None of this gets done by a fiat from D.C. You know, it really requires partnership and the leadership that you all are showing, and us kind of working with you all to advance the great work that you're doing. Leveraging resources. You know, leveraging not only your direct resources, but your reputation in the field is something that we want to continue to look through, and really collectively work on how we can demonstrate leadership in terms of the opportunities that we want to continue to advance. You know, the state data sharing, just going back to data, is really critical. You know, from my perspective, having been involved in this field for a long, long time, you know, some of the wanes of recycling has a lot to do with people not really understanding the real opportunity of recycling and the huge manufacturing jobs benefit of that. So the more that we can, again, share data and articulate the value of the data that we collected, I think it's really going to enhance the ongoing investment in these programs, particularly at the local level, which is really the collection point. And I want to thank the southeastern states for piloting the state data measurement sharing program. Probably the last thing I will say is the continued effort on messaging, you know, what I would call the value-added proposition of investing in the recycling infrastructure for all of its return on investment. You know, the value-addedness of investing in infrastructure, doing life cycle costing, to, you know, having fought the fight on city budgets before I got into this job, you know, it's, you know, without, you know, demonstrating the value-added proposition, we're not going to get that investment in infrastructure. So I want to continue to kind of work collaboratively with you how we can better message that value-added proposition.
Thank you, Matty. I'll move on to our next question, which is a little more, at least easier to communicate. What new EPA policies will increase the recycling capacity at state and local level governments?
Yeah, well, one specific thing is in the President's budget that he just announced, we include a new waste minimization and recycling program project as part of the President's climate action plan. What we've articulated is 42% of greenhouse gases are due to materials management in this country. So huge opportunities that also fuels the economy and creates jobs. So this new grant program will leverage mitigation activities in the waste and materials recovery program to generate all of these greenhouse gas reductions and other co-benefits. So the grant program will focus on increasing the recycling rates for containers and packaging, enhancing and expanding results-driven programs, developing infrastructure and changing behavior through funding such as zero-interest loans to states and local governments and NGOs to put together materials and infrastructure and technical assistance to recycling programs.
Matty, that's a long list. We may have to circle back and actually write all that down to communicate it. That's quite a bit. I'm impressed. Moving to our next, given that the majority of discards from a typical household are recyclable, as in usable by our manufacturing sector, why is it deemed garbage? Should we not be identifying this as the resource that it is?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, clearly we've been taking efforts in that regard for all the reasons that you've identified. But one of the things we consciously have done is shift away from calling it waste management to putting together a whole infrastructure around sustained materials management. That one of the things I did early on in my position here was to do that, and within that articulate the resource and materials benefit of doing that, looking at the metrics that measure the effectiveness of a sustained materials management approach, looking at a life cycle based approach so that we can identify what are the optimal places in the waste stream that lend themselves to the highest rate of either minimization or recovery rates of wasted materials to find the best opportunities for efficiency and effectiveness. A couple of things I will throw out there I want to think about is, sharing best practice for collection. Clearly, collection is a central point. So it's partly, articulating the life cycle benefits of, again, of investing in the recycling and infrastructure, associated infrastructure. But equally important is convincing, be it local decision makers, local consumers, about, the benefit to their local economy for participating and segregating and collecting these valuable materials.
Thank you, Matty. You made reference when we were talking about improving the supply side of the equation to measurement. Specifically, EPS has had success in leading the states into better management, a lot of that in Region 4. The measurement of our recycling activity and the material loss to disposal. What specifically is this data used for, and are there any trends that have been identified, and what might the data be used for in the future?
Sure. The state data sharing program was developed, by the states as a means of establishing kind of an apples-to-apples comparison of state data. As I think you all know, one of the challenges we've had historically is data collected in different ways, so we couldn't really allow for kind of the rigorous trends analysis, a rigorous analysis of what is working and what is not working. So enabling the apples-to-apples comparison is really critical for us in the states to understand the opportunities. And it's also, once you do have this apples-to-apples comparison, allows both us and states to learn from each other, how it then informs effective policies for measurable results. So I think that's one of the things that I think is really critically important, and we're going to incorporate that into the characterization report, so to allow for the interpretation of national data at a regional or state level, and that will include kind of trends analysis.
Thank you, Matty. And related to measurement is what is it we're measuring? What is EPA doing to improve and expand the waste characterization report? How will this help our states, local governments, and industry stakeholders?
Yeah, EPA's effort, is really a multi-year approach to expanding and improving the characterization report. It probably goes back a couple of years where states and local governments and industry noted that the characterization report should be more granular for it to be really an effective tool. So we heard that. The 2013 report will be released on Earth Day this year, and which will be the first time we move beyond just municipal solid waste. It will include data on construction and demolition debris, which is a major expansion to really kind of identify specific areas of opportunity in advancing this sustainable materials management themes. Last year, we added analysis of per capita expenditures versus waste generation. This year we'll continue the expansion to include additional economic indicators such as disposal rate trends. And as I noted earlier, the data is going to be apples and apples, so it allows kind of a rigorous comparative analysis. And also I think we're really trying to make the report more accessible for the multiple of stakeholders who are really influential. And so while I think clearly you need to have those who are expert in the solid waste field to understand that, but we also need to have those who have an influence on policy, everything from mayors and city council members to consumers to really understand what is contained in the characterization report. So what we're thinking of is not only providing this rigorous data, but doing a series of outreach efforts associated with the characterization report, looking at social media. And so one of the things I want to kind of talk to you about at some point is how can we use a characterization report and the data contained in there and the trends contained in there to do a series of outreach efforts to various stakeholders.
I like that idea. But to stay on task with our questions, that's good, but we're working in tight budgets with declining federal and state budgets and personnel resources. Are you able to highlight any programs at the state or federal level that have been able to achieve success, or as you say, measurable results with the reduced support that's out there? Are there other programs states can learn from?
Well, yeah, and actually probably after this call, we'll give you a web link. Now, we've had this through our Sustainable Materials Management Program. We've established various challenges. One of them is an electronics challenge. The second is a food recovery challenge. And the third is the federal green challenge. And all of those are what we ask of those who participate is to establish a baseline and a goal for recovery. So what has happened in these success stories is that they've established tracking systems that work best for them, and we've seen tremendous results coming out of that we want to spotlight, and hopefully that'll be replicated around the country. So, so maybe it's not a direct answer to the question about resources, but I actually think that where EPA is best positioned in this role of materials management is that of a convener and a sharer of best practices and of data and of recognition, so that those that have the direct lead in the recycling, materials, and manufacturing world can use our information to push out and and build out the systems to maximize the recovery of materials and manufacturing based on the recovery of these materials.
Okay, thank you. And in building on that, we look at funding. What funding mechanisms can we just deploy to improve recycling? We've seen private concerns come together to create the Recycling Partnership and the Closed Loop Fund. These measures, while excellent tools, are woefully short in the scope of the magnitude of what needs to be done. How can the EPA help?
Yeah, so again, we recognize the issue, so we put in this grant program in the President's budget. So I'll leave it all up to you to kind of articulate how you feel about that to those who have a direct influence over the budget in the next step of the budget process. I mean, clearly information like the Recycling Economic Impact Report and the economic and jobs value of investment in this is really critical. The economic indicators in the characterization report. But I'll also add this. Having struggled many times in a large city. I worked really hard with trying to get city budgets to invest in recycling infrastructure. And one of the real challenges is we have city council members who are not steeped in this issue, and being able to hand to them kind of a digestible set of facts that show that if you invest X, you get a rate of return of Y over a certain period of time. And one of the challenges that I have seen is, it really takes, from studies that I've seen, it takes cities about 3 years plus to see a significant rate of return of the investment in recycling programs. And one of the, recycling cannot be viewed as, frankly, a do-good activity alone. So there's got to be a budget benefit to the city. So they need to understand that their total budget demand on waste management actually goes down over time by the investment in these recycling resources. But then we add on top of that, done correctly, it also means the value-added proposition of job creation locally and then job creators locally. So I do think there's more work that we can do collectively is providing that digestible set of information in the hands of these critical decision makers.
Thank you. Now let's talk to some specific program, particularly one close to my heart, pay-as-you-throw or SMART, or some refer to this as unit pricing for waste collection. Pay-as-you-throw is difficult to implement locally, but has been shown to be a very effective tool to drive recycling participation. EPA has tools for program design. Can EPA set a mandate that by a certain date all waste collection is based on usage, or as is our other utilities, power, gas, water, phone, cable, and sewer?
Yeah. Well, we don't really have the authority to issue a mandate, but I actually think that even having conversations of mandates would distract from the opportunity. So I think the thing that what EPA can do and has done, and we could talk more about this, is, what is the benefit of these kind of programs to local economies and local budgets? So that's something that we can do. We could have a further conversation about EPA could set goals, and in terms of recycling and even subsets of the recycling materials and the benefits of that, so that when you all kind of work on city budgets and state budgets, you could have that information to be able to have folks invest in the program or invest in policy choices as pay-as-you-throw is.
Okay, thank you. Federal government taxes gasoline to fund infrastructure development. Why can't the EPA tax landfills and incinerators for the recyclable tonnage they dispose and use the revenue to fund recycling infrastructure?
Yeah, I mean, again, one, we don't have that authority, and nor would I seek that authority, to be honest. I actually think that, having a conversation about that at my level probably distracts from the opportunity, So, but I think, again, talking about life cycle cost analysis. So, for example, I mean, it's a specific issue which a lot of, and I've seen it play out in a lot of city budgets, right? So, I mean, you have vendors who articulate, well, you have X finite cost of building a landfill, versus Y cost of building a recycling infrastructure. But more of the life cycle costing about what the recycling infrastructure will bring back to the local government and to the local economy is I think, the best way of advancing this issue. So I'll just give an example from my experience. When Freshco's landfill, the largest landfill, I believe, in the world, at least in the United States at that point, so it initially increased tipping fees. That led the redirection of waste to these various transfer stations, which led to huge cost of then disposing that in various places like Pennsylvania and Virginia. That then drove lots of analysis of, well, why are we throwing this all away? And that led New York City to begin investing in recycling infrastructure, because they saw the benefit of why we pay all this money to throw this away in various locations, whereas there's some potential recovery of these materials that we can invest in. So those are some of the things that I think we could work on.
Thank you. How is the EPA working with other agencies to collaborate on recycling issues, policies, and grants?
Yeah, sure. So one of the things we're trying to do is to use both the federal government purchasing power as well as federal government leading by example to also advance materials recovery. So we have something called the Federal Green Challenge, where we work with all the federal agencies to reduce the environmental impact, and again, they all similarly commit to a baseline and measuring their recovery. So that is, we'll share you the results of who's participating and the results from that. We also have this Food Recovery Challenge, where EPA and USDA are coming around, are joining forces to address food loss. Food loss is really significant in this country. I mean, it's, depending on the statistics that you see, between 30 and 40% of what's thrown away in a landfill is food. A significant percentage of that, could be diverted, and even if it's diverted post-purchase for food banks, could be diverted where it's not edible for soil uses. They're also be going up the chain where you could do purchasing practices at the consumer level, and then we're partnering with a number of national food establishments, building in tracking systems to minimize food loss. I'll give the one statistic that's amazing to me. Every family throws away $1,600 a year in food. So we're trying to use that statistic to kind of really work with everything from national food organizations to faith-based organizations to consumers to have a real significant impact on food loss. Now, probably the last thing I will say is we have this national strategy for electronics stewardship, where we're looking at everything from design for recycling and recovery of those materials, increasing safe recycling programs and establishing having folks who seek to do recycling use one of the two certification programs that exist right now, and working with electronics retailers, electronic manufacturers to build in recovery and minimization of waste defined broadly in the electronics, every step of electronics manufacturing and use.
Thank you. From time to time, Matty, we see issues arise which are priorities for the EPA, PCBs, medical waste, organics, recently coal ash. What is needed to make recycling and landfill diversion a priority topic which rises to the same level as these other priorities?
Well, you know, I think it's one kind of the work that we're doing with you to really bring prominence to the joining of the economic jobs benefit of recycling and materials recovery with the environmental benefit. You know, one of the things I've intentionally done is again to shift towards a sustained materials management framework. I can tell you that sustained materials management is part of the administration-wide effort on sustainability. So we're trying to build it into all aspects of both the administration's effort, the EPA's effort, as well as the effort of my organization. And so it is a high priority, you know, but I do think that the execution of that priority is different than some of the other issues that you raised. You know, so the things like where we need to take a regulatory effort, we need to establish a baseline. But this is different than that. This is different because the driver of success are you all, you know, our industry, our local government. So, you know, in a sense, it's more diffuse, but also it is where strong partnerships, everything from sharing of systems and best practices to communication strategies, is where I think we'll be collectively successful.
Thank you. You have previously made reference to food waste. Organics and specifically food waste seems to be a hot issue now with EPA both regionally and at headquarters. Why is this, and how can states become more informed on these issues?
Sure. You know, some of the metrics. So, for example, in 2012, 34 plus million tons of wasted food was thrown away in landfill. This is the single largest source of methane, the most powerful greenhouse gas. You know, it is in the top of sources of methane. And clearly there's a huge environmental impact on throwing away food, but there's also economic impact, you know, for what I've noted earlier. You know, and there's a social benefit of recovering food. You know, we have 1 to 5 to 1 to 6, depending what studies you look at, where people in this country go hungry for at least part of the year. So diverting food to food banks and other entities to deal with that hunger need as well. So there's an economic benefit of saving money, consumer and in the industry and food production side. There's the environmental, avoiding the environmental impact from wasted food, and then there is a social benefit of feeding the hungry. So I think it's a great alignment, and so in terms of what more we can do, I'm open to what more we can do. We have a food recovery challenge. I would encourage people to join that. You know, we're trying to expand our partnerships with as many folks as possible. We're working with faith-based organizations on seeing how we can partner with them to communicate the benefits of food recovery for all the reasons I've articulated. So that's one of the reasons that it's really a high priority for me, high priority for the administrator and the administration.
If it's a high priority at those levels, then we're going to see something happen.
Yep.
Let's look into next steps. Matty, what do you see are next steps for EPA to advance recycling, and what do you see as the biggest barrier and or opportunity for doing so?
Well, I think the biggest barrier is also the biggest opportunity. So I think that the biggest barrier, one of the biggest barriers, obviously, is all aspects of collection, right? So the consumer side of collection, the local infrastructure side of collection, so that there's a real clear understanding of this value-added proposition. And more that I think we could articulate that, provide tools to measure the benefit of recovering materials. So we want to work. We've established some tools. We're going to continue to establish tools. I think one of the things that we should really think more about is how can we, really consistently with you all and broadly with industry groups, with others who are persuasive in the field to kind of really articulate the benefits of doing this. So hopefully this, in addition, hopefully there's 16 in the president's budget that we called on new funding for a grant program. It's funded, so we can use that tool as well. But also, are there, and I'll throw it out to you all, are there ways that we can kind of convene folks, so where we could bring our ability to convene folks to really kind of advance these efforts. And probably one last thing that I would mention is that we finalized in the end of December definition of solid waste rule. And from my perspective, there is a huge opportunity of materials recovery in that rule. There was a bit of uncertainty about the recovery of materials and whether RCRA is triggered or not. What I think we've done in that rule is provide real clarity, particularly in the manufacturing realm, where what we said is because there's so much of an economic driver for manufacturers to minimize waste and recover as many materials, we provided wide latitude for materials to be recovered without RCRA touching that realm. I think we brought a lot of clarity, and where specific industries call for that clarity, for example, the metals industry and the chemicals industry, and we provided clarity with respect to that. So I think that is a initial foundation. There's we provided this manufacturing exemption in that we've also allowed a petition process to further expand that. So that's an additional opportunity that we think we want to continue to push forward.
Okay, thank you. I guess this question revisits policy a little bit more specifically. What future policies, or what will EPA have future policies that you believe will have an effect on the national recycling rate?
Well, I think that I think it's continuing to move forward on the execution of the sustainable materials management strategy, where we've developed that with state and local governments, and we provide metrics for measuring success there. Continue to work on the consistency and communication of data, and working on the messaging of the benefit of materials recovery. So I think those are all things that we are doing, and I think I'm open to whether some goal setting, some further communication goals, or other kinds of ways that we can kind of collectively communicate some of the benefits, and I know you all have put together, is some of the things I think we could do to kind of benefit the national recycling rate.
I think that's exciting. We now have an opportunity for our audience to ask any questions that have come to mind during the presentation or in the time period that we've had since the summit. The previous questions were those left over from that event in November. You can use your chat box to in your control panel to send questions in. We do have a few here that we've received, Matty, so I'll start here. One, a short one. Can you give a specific example of a best practice?
Specific example of a best practice in the industry side, or well, I'm not sure it's necessarily a best practice. So one of the things that we've identified in the rule that I mentioned is the great success the metals industry has done to recover materials and then being able to develop what we call as a commodity specification, so that they can then demonstrate that those metals are safe and then meet the product specifications for the use as a virgin material. So I think that is one best practice that I would know. But that's just one. I think we want to collect as many best practices as we can. So.
I think that's a good one. Some more of these. Are there any plans to establish a consistent metric for reporting on recycling outcomes in the forms of pounds per capita of waste disposed versus the mishmash of reporting and what is qualified as recycling and diversion? I think you were touching on this previously, but is there anything you would like to add to that? And if you need me to read the question again, I can do that.
Yeah, maybe you can read the question again.
Are there any plans to establish a consistent metric for reporting on recycling outcomes in the forms of pounds per capita of waste disposed versus the mishmash of reporting and what is qualified as recycling and diversion?
Well, absolutely, and I think I mentioned that we want to make the data as granular as we can, on a per capita basis, even breaking out components of the waste stream. And that's where you really see opportunities. You can break out the components of the waste stream and trending of those components of the waste stream. So absolutely. So you're going to initially, we've done a little bit of that last year. We're going to add to that in this year. So for April or so, we're going to be issuing these twin reports, the characterization report and this economic jobs report. But then you all should say, what should we be doing more? But again, I want to underscore that I think that this April, along with the issuance of the report, there's an opportunity for us to collectively message the opportunity. What does that data mean for local policies, for some of those policies that you mentioned, Will? And so we should probably think about an ongoing campaign of messaging to really maximize this data we've collected.
I think that's good. Another question, Matty, we've gotten. What can EPA do to help build productive dialogue between government, brand owners, and packagers to improve recycling in the U.S.? You've made reference to convening more than once. I think this question references that. But what can the EPA do to build that productive dialogue in those stakeholders?
Yeah, so we actually convened a dialogue of around packaging. I'm trying to remember, about 2 years or so ago. So there's a report that you can actually pull down from our web, or we can probably email that out to you, the findings from that. We've joined a national packaging alliance to really kind of identify those opportunities. We are going to make packaging a major focus of sustainable materials management next set of activities. So we're doing all those, but I'm open to additional ways that we can play our appropriate role. So things that we frankly have stayed away from is kind of mandated take back costing, which we think is the province of state and local governments. But the opportunities of recovery, we're more than willing to play a role in convening.
Okay. I think this will build on that. This question is, it may be a priority for water and pharmaceuticals, so why are you not taking the lead? That's as clear as the question is.
Could you say that again?
It may be a priority for water and pharmaceuticals, so why are you not taking the lead? I'm with you. That question's a little nebulous, but I think they're referring that there is an issue around pharmaceuticals not getting collected or even being used and winding up in our water systems, whether they've gone through a person or just being disposed. That we're finding trace pharmaceuticals in our water supplies.
Well, yeah, actually, that's a great question, because we are, in fact, doing a major emphasis on the recovery of used pharmaceuticals. So we have a pharmaceutical rule that we're currently working on. I believe that's slated to go out in the next quarter or so of this year. We have a similar issue around retail strategy, and kind of the whole issue of generators, and you know, there are all these kind of take back policies, in particular in the retail sector, and questions that we receive from manufacturers, from retailers, as to, you know, does that trigger RCRA? Am I a small quantity? Am I a large quantity generator? So we are planning to propose clarification of that. And we recognize that the one-size-fits-all RCRA rule that was necessary when those rules were done 10, 15 years ago does not fit the diversity of the marketplace today. So we are attempting to kind of fix that. You shall soon see rules to address that.
Thank you. This question came in and said, you were about to identify a ranking of food waste in landfills with regard to methane generation. Was there any more to that thought that you would like to communicate?
Well, yeah, and we could probably provide more offline, but wasted food accounts for about 10% of human-generated greenhouse gases. Let me see. You know, what I have is that landfills are the third largest source of methane, and that food is the #1 contributor to landfill waste, about 40% or so. You know, roughly a little under 35 million tons of wasted food goes to landfills. Globally, 1.3 billion tons per year is lost or wasted, and there are differences between the developing world and developed world, where in the developing world, from the field to the market is the largest loss. In the developing world, in the U.S., amazingly, it is from production to consumer use is the largest loss. And so that's kind of, and there's actually a National Geographic did an article about 3 months ago that really did a good articulation of these opportunities.
Building on that, we've got a question. Is there any discussion on reclassifying food waste as a recyclable material, which would allow more competition for composting food waste, because recycling is an open market, whereas solid waste is generally not? Now, I'm going to give you a second. I'm going to go through that again because it's a little awkward. Is there any discussion on reclassifying food waste as a recyclable material that would then allow more competition for composting food waste, because recycling is an open market, whereas food waste is, or solid waste really is not? I think the focus of the question is are we going to call food waste a recyclable material? Clearly, in the world of our single-stream MRFs, food waste is contamination.
Yeah, I need to think about that a bit more. I'll just give you my kind of preliminary thoughts, is that what we've been doing is to try to really maintain the hierarchy that we have in place. So before we even talk about food waste, we want to talk about food recovery. So the hierarchy talks about really reuse first. We want to maximize reuse. And so the food recovery challenge really tries to say, well, let's figure out what is food as food and divert that to be used as food. That's the optimal economic and environmental end result. Then I think there are opportunities for composting. We're doing a major effort on what the opportunities for composting and effective composting. We have this composting initiative. So, where classification fits within that, I'm going to have to think more about that. But thanks for your question. Let me think more about that, and maybe we could follow up. Maybe we could follow in some way of communicating a more rigorous answer back to you.
I agree that was a complicated question. This one may be a little easier, but then this is the last question I have for you, Matty. Does more emphasis on market development mean that regional offices will have new commitments and less emphasis on challenge efforts?
I don't know, is this a question from someone from the region? Just kidding.
I'm probably not going to call the name out there for you, but we can follow up later.
Well, I would say that we want to continue our investment in all the activities of Sustainable Materials Man. So I think it's a continuation of that effort, and I do think that the great work that Region 4 has done with you all should continue. I'd like to see greater opportunities of what they are, in terms of all those things that I've mentioned. So I don't think it's a new mandate or new activity. It's continuation of, I think, the great work that we're doing. But I do think that there are some opportunities in the continuation of that work that, in all the kind of the realms that I discussed.
Well, Matty, I certainly thank you. I want to give you the opportunity for any closing remarks.
Well, I want to thank you, Will. I want to thank the folks at Region 4 who've really done great work with you all. Jay and John and all the other folks in the region. I think that what you all have put together, I think, is a model, frankly, for the rest of the country. And the way that you've been able to kind of integrate the economic and job creation message with the environmental message and outcomes and real-world results. And so, I want to thank you all, and I really want to continue to figure out how we can work more collaboratively together. I want to kind of put a marker down on and I'll charge this with Ron, who's sitting in front of me, that let's look at the rollout of the characterization report as an opportunity for messaging with you all, and let's just figure out, be it social media, be it events, be it some videos. There's some opportunities that are going to really push the message out. So again, I want to thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for the great work you're all doing.
Well, thank you, Matty. We certainly appreciate your complimentary remarks. We do value our relationship with Region 4. We thank you for your time, not only in November to come to the summit, but to share with us today. You made reference early on to the Sustainable Material Management section of your website. That address is on the screen, and we encourage our audience to check the SERDC website anytime it's convenient. I do thank everybody, especially to D. Roger Smith in Atlanta, who managed this presentation for us. Thank you to all, and to all have a wonderful weekend.
Yeah, no, I want to thank Dee as well for great work organizing this.
Thank you all. Take care.
All right, take care. Bye now.
Thank you.